We added the modal. Let's now make sure we only display it if we are actually buying something, if we did click the Order Now button. So the modal is included in the burger builder. Now that's good because in the burger builder, we actually have our state, and that is where we can also determine whether this Order Now button was clicked or not. Actually, we can't right now, but we can easily add the logic to do so. For this, I first of all will add something to my state. I don't only need to know if it is purchasable, but if the Order Now button was clicked. So if we are in purchase mode or something like that. So what I want to do is, I want to set purchasing to false. And of course, purchasing should be changed to false once this Order Now button was clicked. So I will add a new handler, a new method. I'll name it purchase handler. Purchase handler is a normal method, and it should be triggered whenever we click this Order Now button. In there, what I'll do is I will set the state of purchasing to true, just like that. And I need to pass this to build controls. There is the Order Now button in the end. Let's first head to the build controller. So under build controls, here we get this button, and I want to add a click listener to the button. So on click, which is the default click listener, since this is a default button, there I want to execute some method which I receive through props, and we can choose any prop name we want here. We are right about at setting this up. So let's simply name this ordered or something like that. So I want to execute this, and now let's move back to the burger builder, which is the place where we have to pass props to build the controls. And here on build controls, I'll add this ordered prop we just added and bind it to this purchase handler so that this method gets executed when we click the Order Now button. Now it's of course nice that we changed the state to purchasing. That alone won't change the way we see the modal though. I now could conditionally render this modal. We could add some code to conditionally show or hide the modal. This would certainly be a way. Would be even nicer if we could play a tiny animation on the modal. In the modal CSS file, I already prepared it with the transition CSS property to simply animate when this modal is shown. So since this is prepared, we should also take advantage of it. If we just add or remove the modal from or to the DOM, we won't see an animation though. We need to switch some CSS property to show or hide it to be able to animate that. So let's instead pass a property to modal, the show property maybe. You can choose any name you want, and bind it to the purchasing state. Because only if purchasing is true, the modal should be visible. Now with that, let's head over to the modal and let's adjust the code there to change the modal depending on the show property. We already have a class here. Now I want to change some inline style. Though you could also add a new CSS class and add this class conditionally as we do it in other places of this application already. You're totally free to choose the approach you want. But to also practice some inline styles, let's bind style here to something dynamic. That dynamic thing should be a JavaScript object. And there I want to send or set the transform property. If show is true, I'll use a ternary expression here. If it is true, then the then condition comes after the question mark. I'll set transform to translate y 0, which is the position I defined in CSS. So the position it should really have. If show is not true though, I'll set translate y to -100 VH. VH is a special unit which refers to the viewport height. So it will simply slide it outside of the screen. I also want to animate the opacity. So let's also set the opacity to something. If props show is true, it should be 1. If it's not true, so if it's false, it should be 0. So it should be opaque, it should be not visible. It should be transparent, I mean, it should be not visible. So with that, we got that and take advantage of the show property. Save all the files and let's see if this works. The modal is gone. Let's add some ingredients and click order now. We got an error here. Cannot read property set state. Let's head over to the burger builder and to the purchase handler. Set state. And do you have an idea why this fails? I'm executing this set state here, exactly the same I use in other methods too. Why could this fail? It fails because of the way I'm creating this method. I use the same method syntax as I use for render. But you maybe remember that earlier in the course I mentioned that this syntax will not work correctly, at least if we try to use the this keyword in there, if the method is triggered through an event. Due to the way the this keyword, works in JavaScript, it will then not refer to the class. This is not the case for remove and add ingredient handler because I use a slightly different syntax there. I set up these methods as properties where I assign arrow functions. In the end, these are still methods, but internally, they take advantage of arrow functions which basically contain the state or the context of this. So we can easily fix this by setting purchase handler equal to an arrow function 2 and use that syntax for creating the method. Now with that, if we save this, the error message should not pop up anymore. If we now click order now, the modal slides in. So that's looking good. It's also correctly displaying the state. Now, of course, it would now be great if we also had a backdrop, and if we would click this backdrop, if it then would remove or dismiss the modal. Let's work on this over the next lectures.